The Learning Tree, Chapter 12. Newt made the colored basketball squad, traveling with it to Pittsburgh Chanute Parsons, where they won each of their games. Coach Ebon Jones put him in the second half of the third game, and he emerged the second highest scorer. When he got home from school the next evening, he saw his picture in the paper for the first time in his life. He raced to his mother's bedside with it, bubbling with happiness. "I'm mighty proud of you, son," she said. "Have Pete pick up some more of these at the newspaper office." With his spirits thus bolstered, Newt went about his schoolwork more earnestly than ever. And he found that Mr. Hall had been right about Miss McClintock. After the first week she began asking Newt to recite as much as she did the others, and her whole manner became gentler. She even told him that his work was improving, and it was, because he worked hard in her class. As he had promised, he took Arcella's homework to her each day, but he never saw her. She had taken to bed and refused to see anyone. There were rumors that she had tuberculosis, that she had a sleeping sickness. Newt wrote her 2 notes, but they weren't answered, and his heart became sad. He wouldn't eat and he couldn't sleep, so finally, in desperation, he went to his mother with his problem. She was propped in her bed drinking tea when he entered. Sensing that he was troubled, she spoke first. "Something bothering you, son?" He nodded gloomily. "Yes'm. Might as well tell you. It's Arcella. You know she's been sick." "Yes, I've been hearing about it. How is she?" "That's the trouble. I don't know. I've been to see her several times, but she won't see me. I wrote her twice, and she didn't even answer my letters." "Maybe she's too sick, Newt. Maybe. It's more than that. Even her mother wouldn't talk to me when I went by there this evening." "Did you do something you shouldn't have?" "No, ma'am. Nothing I know about." "Well, give it time, son. It'll all blow over. Give it time." But the time came and time went, and he got no word. The Christmas holidays were approaching again, but it was apparent that they would not be the same as before. Jack couldn't find work, and neither could Pete. Prissy, who'd been working at Judge Kavanaugh's on the weekends, took to working full time for the holidays. Newt went about with Beansy and Jappy, shoveling snow or tackling any other odd job they could find. A few days before Christmas, Newt returned home, cold and low of spirits, to find his father waiting for him outside the door. The scowl on his father's face told him that something was amiss. "Hi, Papa." "Come on in the house, boy," Jack said. "I want to talk to you private. You've got some explaining to do." What could it be, Newt wondered, following his father into the dining room. "Boy," Jack started, "that Jefferson girl's father was over here to see me today." "Yes, sir." "Well, don't that mean nothing to you, boy?" Newt looked up, surprised at the question and his father's manner. I don't get what you mean," he said. "Is she worse or something?" Jack Winger looked long and hard at his son before he spoke again. "Mr. Jefferson says. He says Arcella's going to have a baby. That's what he says." Newt felt as if a stick of dynamite had exploded in his stomach. He was stunned beyond speech. "Well, do you know anything about it?" He turned away, but Jack spun him back around, whispering fiercely, so as not to disturb Sarah. Tell me, boy, did you do something to that girl?" "No, Papa, no, Papa," he cried. I didn't." "Quiet, quiet, Jack." It was Sarah. "What's going on? What's the matter?" Newt broke from his father's grasp and strode into his mother's bedroom. Oh, Mama," he said. "What is it, son? What is it, Jack? What's going on?" Her hand was about Newt's wrist. Jack went slowly to her bed. "I didn't want to bother you with this right off, but Bob Jefferson was over to see me this afternoon about his daughter." "Well, what about her?" Sarah asked nervously. "She's going to have a baby." "A baby!" Sarah's grip tightened. "He thinks Newt had something to do with it?" "Yep, that's what he's thinking," Jack moaned. "Did you, Newt?" Sarah looked into his eyes for the answer. "Did you, son? Tell me the truth. Don't be afraid." Newt was shaking now with unutterable hurt. "No, Mama, it wasn't me. But I wish it was." Sarah looked up at Jack. "He's telling the truth," she said. "He's telling the truth." They were quiet for a moment. "What does Arcella say?" Jack shrugged. "She won't say who it was. Won't say at all." "Well, Jack, only one thing to do. Take him over there to face the girl and see what she says in front of him. No sense in them thinking it's him when it's not. Yep, that's the only thing to do. Come on, boy, come on. I declare, you'll be the death of me." Newt turned and followed his father from the room. A few minutes later, when Newt entered Arcella's room with his father and her parents, she angrily pulled the covers up over her head. But her father snatched the covers back down to her shoulders and said, "Now, I want you to tell us, here and now, if this boy is responsible. You hear me, girl? Speak up." "I told you 1,000 times he wasn't," she shouted. "Why do you keep bothering me with it?" "Then who is it if it ain't him?" Bob Jefferson hollered back. "Bob. Bob." Arcella's mother was on the bed beside her. "Tell us, honey. Tell us and get it over with. Mama'll help you." The room was extremely quiet for a minute. Mrs. Jefferson wiped the tears from Arcella's eyes with the top of her sheet. Arcella turned over in the bed, then she reached for Newt's hand. "Come sit beside me. You'll try to understand, won't you, Newt?" "Yes, I'll understand." "I'm awfully sorry, Newt, awfully sorry." "Yes." He was silent after the one word. "You will forgive me, won't you?" Newt nodded his head, and after sniffing a couple times, she said, "Well, Papa, it's going to shock you, I know, and all the rest of you, too. I told you not to go and get Newt mixed up in this, but you wouldn't listen." Newt had a sudden desire to run from the room, not wanting to hear the rest. He tried to get up, but Arcella pulled him back to her. "It was Chauncey," she said. "Chauncey Cavanaugh, Papa. Not Newt, like you said." She released Newt's hand, and he got up, walking quickly out of the room. He rushed down the stairs and out in the cold, senseless day. As he walked along, he kept repeating, "Chauncey, Chauncey," softly to himself. On Christmas morning Newt got up especially early and made the fire. But he didn't call the others. Instead he stood beside the dining room door looking at the tree, remembering the Christmas before when he and Arcella had been so happy. He had a present for her now, among the few others under the tree. He picked it up and went out the door. It was snowing heavily, so he turned up the collar of his mackinaw and walked slowly toward Arcella's house. He decided to place the gift on the porch, and he didn't want to be seen. As he approached the house he wiped the wet snow from his brows and peered ahead. Then he moved quickly to the porch, pulled back the storm door, and placed the gift on the threshold. Turning to leave, he noticed the window shade was up. He glanced through it, expecting to see the Christmas tree, and caught his breath. The room was bare. Pressing close to the window, he was able to see through most of the house, and there wasn't a stick of furniture anywhere. The Jeffersons must have slipped away in the darkness of Christmas Eve, he concluded. So Arcella was gone from him forever. For a moment he stood gazing at the red and green parcel of lilac water settling in the moist snow between the doors. He started to pick it up, but then decided to leave it there. He closed the storm door gently against it and turned and headed for home. Wonder why she did it. Must have lost her head for a minute. Thought she could go to the other side of the tracks for good. Chauncey's big car and his money and big house and everything. But who knows, maybe she really liked him. Maybe he really liked her. She was pretty enough for anybody to like. Only thing wrong for her with Chauncey was her color. When he arrived, the family was still asleep, so he went back to the living room and took another look at the tree. It seemed dull compared to the one of the previous year. The scarcity of presents on the floor spoke of the hard winter. Outside the window, the whitened land seemed gray under the thick curtain of tumbling flakes. Newt gritted his teeth, swallowed the lump in his throat, and then tromped through the house, shouting, "Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas!" Then, as on other Christmases before, he put on the coffee pot, knowing, as always, his father would be less grouchy if his insides were warmed up. It snowed on for 2 days and part of another night. When it stopped, the cattle barns could hardly be seen from the house. The big snow was a blessing for Jack and Pete, for they were hired by the county to help clear the outlying roads. On the last Saturday of the month Newt went along. Sitting between his father and Pete on the big plow truck, he watched the snow churn up and off to the side, where in some places the drifts were higher than the cab of the truck. Halfway between the swimming hole and Jake Kiner's place on the river road, Pete stopped the truck and braced for such a drift. Then he revved up the motor and knifed the plow blades into it, sending the snow over them in all directions. There was a sudden jolt, and Newt and his father slammed forward into the dashboard. The truck bounced back and stalled. "What did you hit?" Jack boomed. "Don't know," Pete hollered back. The three of them jumped down and started kicking the snow away from the object buried in their path. "It's a car," Newt yelled. "It's a car, Papa." Pete grabbed 3 shovels off the truck and they began uncovering the car. It was an old Model T Ford, and it took them 5 minutes to dig their way through its windshield. "Careful now," Jack cautioned. "I hope and pray nobody ain't in it." They dug slower, inching their way. "Papa!" Newt hollered. "I hit something on the running board." "Get back, let me see." Jack felt the object with the shovel and carefully scraped away the snow. He stopped suddenly. "Good Lord, it's a man. He's as stiff as a board." "He's dead, Papa?" Newt questioned. That you can be sure of, Jack said solemnly. Anybody we know? Pete asked. Ain't never seen him before, Jack said. Newt peeked and said, me either. It's a Missouri plate, Pete said, brushing the snow off the raised numbers. Jack turned to Newt. You better hike back to town and get Kirky. Just tell him what we found. We're going to keep digging. Might find someone else here, too. When Newt returned with Kirky in Doug Simpson's Ford car, his father and brother had dug the car completely free of the drift. Kirky strode over to the corpse, kneeled down, and wiped the loose snow from the face. Hey, he said, that's Bats Oliver. He's a bootlegger from Kansas City. He got up, forced open the back door of the car, and yanked a tarpaulin off the back area. Look here, he's got the whole ass end loaded with booze. He inspected the cache more closely. Hell, must be more than 50 bottles in there. Want some, Jack? Nope, Jack said. Nothing I can do with that stuff. Well, he sure won't be needing it, Kirky said. He and Doug loaded the bottles into their car, stepping over and around the body as if it were a log. Then Kirky said, you all stay here. I'm going to get the dead wagon. Be right back. And with that, Doug turned the car around and drove off. On New Year's Day, Sarah had a visit from Judge Kavanaugh. She'd expected him for some time, so his coming was no surprise. He brought food packages and a few gifts for everyone, and Rodney had come along to help with these as well as to see Newt. After a while, in the quiet of Sarah and Jack's bedroom, the judge told him what he suspected they had known for days. He spoke his regret and said that Arcella would be taken care of. He didn't say in what way, and Jack and Sarah didn't ask. Of course, Chauncey had denied everything, but to no avail. He will work this summer, if he has to dig ditches, to pay for all of this and more, the judge said. He and Rodney ate the black-eyed peas and pig's feet with the wingers for good luck. Then they got into their big shiny Maxwell and went off to their big house on the other side of town. 5 days later, Prissy came home and said Chauncey had packed his clothes and slipped away while the judge was in court. All he left was a letter for the poor judge, Prissy sighed. January, February, and March were equally cold, desolate, and hard for Jack Winger and family. The feed bins running low and the icebox near empty, Jack had to kill off most of its chickens and slaughter 2 of his best hogs. 1 cow died, and a horse was crippled from a fall on the ice. Jake Kiner had brought in feed a couple times when he needed it desperately, and though Jack couldn't pay for it, he had noted the amount in his soiled account book. You'll get it back soon, I'm as able, he told Kiner. Yet all was not bad. Jack promised to hire Pete for some spring cattle driving, and Sarah finally got permission from Doc Cravens to return for work on the 1st of April. In addition, Prissy announced that she had a beau, though she never revealed who he was. Newt, in spite of his loss, had been doing extremely well in school, and he would become a regular on the basketball team, being the 3rd freshman in history of the school to do so. As the months wore on, the pain of his wound gradually lessened, and every now and then he would completely forget the bittersweet affair. Still, naturally, there were times when, catching the scent of lilac water, or scanning the inscription in Poe's book of stories, Love Arcella, December 1925, he felt life wasn't worth living. He had inquired of her when his team returned to Chanute after the holidays, but no one he asked knew of the family's whereabouts. It was as if they'd disappeared from the earth without leaving a trace. Later, in the early part of April, he dreamed of lying with Arcella on the mossy earth near the violets in Peaceful Park, but he awoke only to a rooster's crowing, and his heart, which had seemed to thump on Arcella's breast, beat only against his lumpy mattress.